This is a short clip. It's nothing long, but I still wanted to look at it with you guys because it's so telling. You keep hearing about what's happening in Ukraine as it's a war between Russia and Ukraine, and that's it. And anything else is Putin propaganda. And something that they particularly like to refute is the idea that it's a proxy war. Okay? Just to give you an example, here is the UK Defense Secretary insisting that it's not a proxy war.
Well, I think we've seen a number of statements from Putin recently about, this is becoming a war, this is a proxy war, which it isn't, this is...
Okay, so that's the Ben Wallace, the British Defense Secretary. Now, here's another clip, the one that I wanted to show you from Fox News, I think. Yeah, and this is with Congressman Moulton. Let's see what he has to say about what's taking place in Ukraine.
If they wrap this in the Senate with a Ukraine funding and a COVID funding, you guys okay with that, Congressman Moulton?
Look, I'm going to support it because it's the right thing to do for Ukraine. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of politics involved, and there will be domestic debates here at home about other policies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we've got to realize we're at war. And we're not just at war to support the Ukrainians. We're fundamentally at war, although it's somewhat through a proxy, with Russia, and it's important that we win.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. I like these moments where the mask comes off and they let the cat out of the bag and the truth, the inconvenient truth slips out. Now, obviously, we didn't need the very benevolent Congressman Moulton to bring us up to speed on this very apparent and clear reality. We know that it's a proxy war because just 2 days ago, U.S. officials are bragging in the media how they helped the Ukrainians kill Russian generals. Now, again, 12 Russian generals in 2 months seems like a bit of a stretch to me. I could be very wrong, though. Regardless, it's not just that. It's also that they've been bragging, the Americans have been bragging that they helped the Ukrainians take down the Moskva, which is the flagship Russian vessel in the Black Sea. So it's multiple things. It's not just one incident or one statement from some congressman. And when you put these things together, it becomes very clear that this is a proxy war. Now, what's different about this and other proxy wars is that usually when you're fighting a proxy war, you don't want the enemy to know that you're involved. That's the whole point of a proxy war. Like, you do the dirty work for me. Yeah? I'll give you the money, I'll give you the guns, and you do the fighting because I don't want to get involved. I don't want to face XYZ consequence. So you act as a front for me. That's the idea, okay? Just as an example, in Afghanistan, when the Soviets came in from 79 to 89 during the Cold War, the Americans were arming the Mujahideen, and that, of course, went on to people from that went on to form Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and so on. So, thanks, Uncle Sam, for creating Al-Qaeda. But that was also an example of a proxy war where the U.S. was giving them stingers to shoot down Russian aircraft and other forms of training and funding and so on, and support, but without showing their hand, right? Without saying, hi, we are arming the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets. That they wanted to keep that under wraps because the very real danger posed by revealing your hand, especially as the U.S. in this case, is that you risk a nuclear confrontation, right? Why would the U.S. do a proxy war? Because you don't want a hot war. You don't want the U.S. fighting with the Russians directly, because both these countries have nuclear weapons. The Russians and the Americans have the most nuclear weapons, and they would annihilate each other, and we would all die. Okay, the whole world would just be blown to bits. They have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world several times over. So even if they just hit Russia or they just hit the U.S., the fallout, the radiation will be carried over into other countries and so on. So it's a very global concern, and that's why you don't want this. But here, the Americans are very proud, and I've never seen anything like this. I've never. Again, I think it's really important to study the Cold War and to understand the world today, because in many ways it has not changed. In some it has, but in many ways it hasn't. And I have never seen in the Cold War something like this, where the Americans are bragging. They are bragging to the media, leaking to the media, we killed those Russian generals. We gave the intelligence to kill those Russian generals. We sunk that Russian ship. What the fuck? Are you crazy? Like, how? Why are you doing this? And then it's not only that. The U.S. Defense Secretary is saying we want to weaken the Russians. And the U.S. President is saying this guy can't remain in charge. The Russian leader can't remain in charge. I have never seen anything like this. please correct me if I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong. But even in the Cold War, when they had nukes pointed at each other in multiple continents, never they said shit like that. They would actually go and sit down and negotiate and have peace talks and avert this kind of stuff. And with that said, there's a lot of bloodbaths and bloodshed during the Cold War through proxy wars and the US and the Soviets fighting each other. But even then, you do not have such coarse, brazen, callous, reckless statements coming out of the mouths of US officials, either via the media or, on camera, as we saw with Biden or Austin. So this is very, very shocking. And now this congressman over here saying that at the end of the day, we've got to realize we're at war. We're fundamentally at war. And he specifically calls it a proxy war. Again, just to play that to you, this is quite damning.
Politics involved, and there will be domestic debates here at home about other policies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we've got to realize we're at war. And we're not just at war to support the Ukrainians. We're fundamentally at war, although it's somewhat through a proxy, with Russia, and it's important that we win. Wow.
So do you understand why this is important? It's not important because it's a precedent. It's the first time this happens. It's not only important because it means there could be a nuclear apocalypse. It's also important because this helps you understand that what you're being told by Western mainstream media is false. Because if you turn on the BBC or you turn on CNN or Fox News, they will tell you that this is strictly a fight between Ukrainians, trying to liberate themselves from the Russians, and it's basically, occupier versus occupied, which conveniently they never say about the Palestinians being occupied by the Israelis. But that's how they frame it, okay? And they do this on purpose because they don't want to reveal their hand. They don't want to show you that actually this is very, very beneficial and lucrative. It's very profitable for the weapons industry, okay? Who, as you can see, they've made hundreds of millions, now in the billions, tens of billions of dollars. And all of their stocks have gone up. They don't want you to know this, right? So they frame it in a way that garners sympathy and provokes an emotional reaction, like, oh, those poor Ukrainians, they're fighting to liberate themselves. And I get that. I really get that from a point of view of the Ukrainians. I really do. But you have to understand something. The Ukrainians are being used. They're being used by NATO. And this Congressman Moulton is basically telling you that we are at war. We, meaning the Americans, okay? He's an American congressperson. And he is saying that America is at war with Russia through a proxy. So it's very clearly saying that they're using the Ukrainians. And when you say this very obvious truth, they call it Putin propaganda. They call it Russian propaganda. Why? Are you telling me that Congressman Moulton is working for the Kremlin? That's a very loaded accusation. Even when US officials say these things, it's still like they're this twilight zone that we're living in. They want to deny reality. Like, no. This is Russia, Kremlin propaganda. My goodness. It's really scary. Really scary, honestly. They talk about North Koreans being brainwashed and they make fun of them and they mock them and degrade them. It's, they're like these zombies who don't know anything except what the state tells them. Just look at the West. Look at how people are in the West, how they're being controlled by the media. It's shockingly similar to this caricature that they paint about other countries, if not worse. So honestly, this is very, very damning. And you should remember this when people try to make this out to be, it's just a fight between Russia and Ukraine. It's not. It's not. And they don't want you to know this because then this lends credence. I don't know if in whole, but certainly in part, in a fraction, at least a little bit, it lends a little bit of credence to the Russians' argument that they are being faced with a threat from NATO. Do you understand? Because you can just pull up a map of NATO expansion and kind of see it, that they've encircled Russia after the end of the Cold War, which makes no sense. They doubled their membership, even though the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. This threat that NATO was created to fight is not there. That's one thing, and they deny that. And when you point that out, they don't want to hear it. How can you deny this? This is happening right now. So pay attention. Be on the lookout. Pay attention sometimes to what these officials are saying. They let the truth slip out from time to time. And right now, the Americans are doing it very, very, very much. So I know Ben Wallace says otherwise, but he's not running the show. The Americans are running the show at the end of the day. And you should pay more attention to their moves and their words. One more thing that I wanted to add the Americans say they have a democracy, right? Usually in the United States, under the Constitution, the American president, the US president, has to go through Congress and get permission to go to war. So if this guy, Congressman Moulton, is saying the US is at war, somebody please remind me, when did Joe Biden go to Congress and ask for permission to start a war with Russia? Again, it's not me saying Russia and the US are at war. It's a US congressperson saying Russia and the US are at war. It's Lloyd Austin saying things like we have to weaken Russia. When did the US president, when did Joe Biden get permission from Congress? He obviously didn't. So either, either the Constitution that they talk about all the time and their democracy is a myth, or Joe Biden is violating it and everybody's giving him a pass. Either way, there's something very fundamentally wrong at play here, right? And things like the War Powers Resolution in 1973, these were created on purpose by Congress to keep these sorts of things in check, right? Because back then, the idea was that Richard Nixon was bombing Cambodia and Laos behind Congress' back, okay? And according to what the White House was saying, they were just in Vietnam. That was a lie. They were also in Cambodia and Laos and in the neighboring countries next door. And so because he didn't tell Congress about that and he was doing it behind their back, they put in place the 1973 War Powers Resolution. And the idea behind this is that if the US president takes military action against a foreign country, he must notify Congress within 48 hours. He must do this. And then Congress can look at this, okay, at his reasoning and what he did. And if they want, they can authorize him 60 days to continue these operations, okay? And of course, they call these things issued by Congress where they give the US president permission, authorization for the use of military force. For short, it's AUMF. Okay, so when they attacked Afghanistan in 2001, they had the AUMF of 2001. And that was passed in the week after 9/11. And then when they attacked Iraq, they had the AUMF of 2002. Now, again, just to be very clear, just because the US Congress passes a document doesn't mean it's legal internationally, right? It's maybe legal on US soil, but it doesn't mean that it's legal or it was okay for them to attack Iraq. It's still illegal to this day, and it's a war crime, right? It's a crime of aggression. And just because the US Congress voted for it is fucking irrelevant. That means absolutely nothing. So just so you understand how far this extends, you shouldn't think, oh, the US Congress said it's okay, so that means the whole world has to accept it. No, that's not true. US law is not international law. There are boundaries, especially when we keep hearing them talk about international norms. You see how they always say international norms and international rules-based order, but never international law. That's very funny. Pay attention to the word games. So in any case, from what I can see, just to go back to my point, I don't see an AUMF from Congress giving Biden authorization to attack Russia. So either Congressman Moulton is lying or Biden is violating the Constitution, and he's also violating the 1973 War Powers Resolution. Because again, the US Constitution does say that the US president is the commander-in-chief, but it also says that Congress plays a very, very important role in decisions related to war. So you cannot just pick and choose what you like. And there's no mistake about, if you had any doubts or there was any confusion, there are no confusions with the 1973 resolution, because that kind of sets things straight, right? The president cannot just do whatever he likes. He has to go to Congress. So again, just another point of view how they're even violating their own laws in the US and going and attacking Russia, not even covertly, overtly.